Hey everybody, and welcome back to the IE427 garage. Today we have some 25th anniversary content for you. We are working on all of the Footbox aluminum. It is a rainy day here in Southern California, so our construction business is at somewhat of a standstill because the projects we have, we're either waiting on bathroom fixtures or the work is outside. So whatever we could do in the morning to take care of paperwork is done, and it's early in the afternoon here, and I am working on the 25th anniversary car. So hang with us, and I'll show you some tips on how to work around powder coated panels so you don't completely mar them up while you're assembling everything. All right, first tip I want to give you is if you are working on panels that are powder coated, two things. Don't use a center punch to mark your holes because it's going to deform the panels. And those little puckers that you get in the panels are going to show behind the rivets. So I don't like that. If that doesn't bother you and you want to center punch your stuff, hey, great, go ahead and do it. I choose not to. The second thing is I do not use a rivet spacing gauge, especially like the one that Factory 5 gives you, because to me it just doesn't offer enough flexibility. Sometimes for smaller panels like this, I may want to space my rivets at 3 inches. Sometimes the panels are so small that you'd have only 2 rivets on a panel and it just looks funny. So in some instances, I'll reduce that space down to 1.5 inches. Other times, I'll space them at 2. What it's going to come down to is I'm going to measure the panels and see what spacing is going to work out the best. So I'm going to mark in here off the edge of the panel, probably about 3/4 of an inch for my first hole for a rivet. And the same thing over on this side. And then I'm going to measure in between those 2 holes and see what spacing, what even or odd number spacing, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, whatever it is going to work out the best. And that's how I'm going to space the rivets. The other tip that I told you in another video, and the difference here is that since this panel is powder coated, we are using masking tape. You can use a silver Sharpie, but you go to wipe the silver Sharpie off with acetone and you may discolor your powder coat. So depending on what color you're going with your powder coat, and this is only if you've had your panels powder coated before you drill and fit them. I normally choose to powder coat them after all the panels have been pre-fit. I found out after this car arrived that the 25th anniversary cars come with all of the cockpit and aluminum for the engine compartment pre-powder coated. And one thing, I'll walk over to the car in a second, but I found out they're not even attached to the chassis like they normally are with a standard Mark IV kit. So I'll walk over to the car in just a few minutes and we'll talk about, you know, what that means for you if you're working on a 25th anniversary car. But what I did was I went ahead and I took some masking tape. I have 2 different widths of masking tape. I have some 3/4 inch width and I have some 1 inch width. Since this panel overlap or flange is about 3/4, that's what I use for here. And then I took my extra fine Sharpie or marker and basically held my finger against the side of the panel, the tip of the pen there, and then just went down and marked my line. It'll give you a nice straight line. You don't have to get out a ruler in order to do it, and that'll give you a starting point on where you're going to drill your holes. All right, back over here at the car, And what I found out, and I didn't realize this until I was pulling the panels out. This was yesterday. I was pulling the panels out to see exactly, you know, which panels were in which boxes and how I was going to arrange them and everything. And so this piece, for instance, had a hole in it. And I thought, oh, great. It was attached. But it wasn't. There's no hole here in the chassis. So the holes in the panels that I've seen are either holes put in during the powder coat process. So this, since it's a cockpit piece, went out for powder coat. I'm assuming that Factory 5's powder coating company took this panel, drilled a hole in it so they could hang it to fog the powder coat onto the panel and then put it in the oven so it would do its baking. The other thing is we do have a firewall forward kit on that. Those are nice because they're already pre-drilled. So that's been pre-drilled all the way down. We'll be working on that. I'm just kind of working right now on fitting all the panels together. I'm just going to mark them and cleco them at the ends of each of the marked spaces that I put. Once I'm fairly confident they're going to fit where I want them, then I'll go through and drill the rest of the holes. I'm just trying to make sure that all of the panel gaps where the panels come together are going to meet nice and tight and the way I want them to. So this is less about powering through and getting all of the holes drilled and the panels riveted on, because quite honestly, I'm only going to rivet those panels that I know I'm not going to pull off. So for instance, the top of the footbox on this side, I know I won't be taking off. It'll get riveted in. The front of this footbox will get riveted in. The inside portion of that footbox will get riveted in. And then the same thing on the driver's side. So on this side, I'm going to leave the top open and I'm going to leave this outside panel off, because I know down the line I'm going to have to be the one that puts the heat and sound mat and the carpeting in this, and it's a lot easier to do that with the panel off. I will pre-fit it. I will pre-drill it. It will have all of the holes ready to go so that when I'm ready to attach it, I can do that, but I'm not going to permanently mount that panel right now. Then I will probably move on to the floors and the tunnel sides. I will do the upper back trunk. I will not do the rear trunk. And then I will probably work on the back of the cockpit here. So the back of the cockpit may not get attached permanently right away, nor will the sides. But that upper trunk, since I have the lift to run my fuel lines, my electric, and my emergency brake lines, I don't have the issue of trying to get some of that stuff routed in the back because I have access from underneath on the lift. Now I'd normally be working up on the lift when I'm drilling panels, but you know, it's raining today and I don't feel like getting either of the cars wet as I move stuff around the shop. So we're doing this on the floor, just like you guys would most likely be doing in your shop at home. So I'm going to give you a little tip as you're doing each of these panels. So you can see all the debris from drilling both through the second panel, because there's actually two panels here. There's the panel here, and this panel over on this side wraps under and up and behind this panel. So I didn't pre-drill the back panel. It makes no sense to pre-drill it because you can drill through both of them when you drill through the front. So what I did is I positioned the panels where I wanted them, and then I took a pair of one of the best tools in the world, vice grips, and I clamped it on there like that, so it wasn't blocking any of the holes that I wanted to drill. And what I did is I started on this side. I drilled that one first, and then I drilled this one over here. Now, I started on this side over here with one of those double-ended drill bits that I told you guys about in a previous video. But since these panels are already powder coated, you're going to have to use an extra level of precaution when you're drilling them, because the chuck on the drill, if you're using standard length drill bits, is going to want to dig into this stuff as you're drilling some of these holes. I mean, we've got a throat depth of about 5 inches here. So you can pull the panels down a little bit to give yourself a little bit more room. However, you can also invest in a few of these 6-inch long drill bits. And you can see that it's going to put you far enough back that after you bend this panel down a bit, you'll be able to drill that hole without having the chuck dig into something. This chuck used to be all black, but you can see through all the years of use, the black paint on the outside of it was worn off because it's rubbed on things. So if this rubs on there as smooth as it is, it's going to damage that powder coat. So you're going to want to do something in order to protect those panels as you're drilling them. So that would be my suggestion. Tape all of the panels before you put them on. And this only applies if you're doing pre-powder coated panels. And then get a selection of longer drill bits so that in those certain areas you'll be able to get the drill in a position where you're not going to start hammering on those panels and ruining your brand new powder coat. There's one thing really important to mention. When you're laying out the spacing of your panels, check to see where on the opposing panel your drilled hole is going to lie. So I'll turn this panel over in a second, but you can see if I drilled this hole over here, it's going to miss catching the flange on this panel. The same thing over here where this panel's opened up, this ply cut's opened up. If I would have drilled that hole in the center here, basically I'd just have to fill it with a rivet because it wouldn't be tying into anything. And so these right here, you can see I was only really able to put 3 rivets, in this case they're Clecos, in that one flange right there. So from the top, it doesn't look like, you know, the rivet spacing is perfect. But you have to keep in mind that you're not going to be able to lay out your rivets perfect because some instances there may be nothing behind it. So if you want your rivets to be perfect, just know you're going to burn through a lot of rivets, extra rivets, that basically go into nothing. So turning this panel over, you can see where I laid out, oh, sorry guys, hang on a second. You can see where I laid out this corner, and I did not make a mark in that corner because I turned the panel over to make sure there was something there before I drilled. And just like this, oh, that's pretty close. Just like here, I couldn't put a hole or a rivet normally where I would drill in about a 1/2 inch from the end, and I had to move it in almost a full inch in order to make it hit that flange on the back. And kind of the same thing over here. I drilled all these holes right here, and this is actually going to go into the bottom of the dash support. So I'm going to pull all this tape off right now. I'm going to go over and put this on the chassis. But I wanted to point that out to you guys about the rivet spacing and everything else, because you can really get yourself in a lot of hot water having a bunch of holes drilled in panels that don't actually do anything. All right, I don't want this video to drag on forever, but I want to point out another reason why we're pre-fitting these panels. So let's say that you decided that you got this nice firewall forward kit that you got from FF Metals, and you want to put that on the first thing. And so you bolt that thing on, or you rivet that thing on, it's siliconed on, and the back of it is, got all that adhesive. And now you realize that you can't get to that rivet right there. This is one of those reasons why you want to pre-fit all these things. And if not only make a mental note of how these panels are going to go together and how you're going to assemble them in what order, but write them down so you know that your chances of getting a rivet gun in that corner to get that rivet in there are slim to none. And so if that firewall forward kit is in permanently, you're going to have to send that rivet in from the bottom of that panel. And so that ugly rivet end where the pull shaft is going to be what's visible there. So make sure that you have something to remind yourself that these panels have to go in a certain order. Otherwise, you're going to get to a point where you're just going to throw up your hands in disgust and walk away for a month. So, all right, everybody, it's the next day. I am back on the 25th anniversary car this evening, and, well, it's actually 2 days later because I worked on this last night and I didn't film anything, so I'll catch you guys up real quick. I'm working on the driver's side footbox of the car. Since I don't have access to the lift right now, I've got Michael's car up on the lift. I'm kind of doing this differently than I normally would. But I've got a trick that I'm going to do for the bottom of the footboxes for both the driver's and the passenger side, but I'll show you that later. What I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to get everything fit in place. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that on all of the parts that you're going to see when the car is put together, that those parts that are the most prominent look the best. And I'm going to give you an example. So when there's a discrepancy, let's say on the front of the car here versus the back of the car here, okay, even though this is going to be hidden in the fender well, you're still going to be able to see this past the front looking back here. If someone sticks their head down in the engine compartment, or they're standing over here looking this way, they're going to see this. So better to get this corner to fit better, and this little gap that we have over here is going to be hidden by the body. You're not going to see it because the dash is going to cover this up. So when you're fitting your panel, try to think forward enough to realize that those parts that aren't going to be seen aren't going to be quite as important. So another part here, since these panels were pre-powder coated, I had no opportunity to fit these before they got the black powder coating on them. This piece is long. I mean, it's long by, I don't know, how much is that? Maybe 1/8 of an inch, right? Now I could come in and trim it, or I could come in here and I could trim the inside so it would move farther in this way. The problem with that is that then it'd have a raw edge, right? And if I were to cut off this end right here, there's always a chance that when my, whatever I use, whether I were to use like hand tin snips or my electric shear, chances are it would chip the powder coat. And then that raw aluminum with that chip powder coat is going to be seen from over here. So my decision on this is to just run it long. It's 1/8 of an inch long, but it's all black, and you're not going to see it once the car is, finished assembled. So in stuff like this, unless you want to send it back to the powder coater, just leave well enough alone and it'll be fine. Now, one thing that I noticed on this car that kind of harkens back to the Mark 3.1 that Michael has, that's different than my Mark 3, which is an early Mark 3, is the steering shaft has changed. And it's changed a bunch of times over the years. This steering shaft is held with set screws on both ends. So there's a set screw here to this D shaft, and there's a set screw on the other end of this D shaft. On my Mark III, these pieces are welded. So it's welded here and it's welded down here. And I have a separate coupler for my steering rack, meaning there's two pieces here. There's the knuckle, right? The U-joint knuckle. And then there's a separate adapter that is just for what type of rack you're going to use, whether it's a power steering rack or a manual rack. This is different. So with all those adjustments in there, I see guys asking if they can run the bearing. Okay. This is a captured bearing, a flange bearing that mounts to the firewall. I see a lot of guys asking on the Facebook groups and the forum whether they can run this on the inside. Well, yes, you can. But if you run the wheelwood pedal assembly and you put this on the inside, you're going to have to cut the top of this because this interferes with the bottom of the wheelwood pedal box bracket on the front. So just keep that in mind. I'm choosing at this point, and I can change later, I'm choosing to run this on the firewall side. So the outside, the engine side. Okay? And I'm gonna put it on the outside here because there's enough play in that steering shaft that I showed you to adjust it. And if I have to, I could even cut it a little because there's plenty of steering shaft that slides in the inner D shaft coming from the actual steering wheel. So I'm going to run it on the outside. My reasoning on that is that this is powder coated black, the frame is powder coated bronze, and I don't want this to be shown bronze, black, and then silver with the flange on the, if I were to put it on the inside. So by putting the flange on the outside, it's just going to be black on silver, done, and I just think it's going to look neater, and that's the way it's shown in the assembly manual anyways. That's the way I normally do it when I'm running a car that does not have a brake booster. Because with the brake booster, you need all the clearance you can get, and so that I normally put it on the inside. So that's where I'm at on that. Tonight I'm working on the other side of the footbox. So I'm going to work on this inside panel here. And as I progress, I'm not going to be doing all the panels in this one video. So as I move on to other parts of the aluminum panel installs, I will actually show you guys the details on that. What I'm trying to show you in this one is some of the orientations and some of the why do I do it this way kind of questions that come up. Because what I try to do is I try to make everything look the nicest from the side of the car that you're going to be looking at. So for instance, if I've got rivets to go in, right? They might be easier to send those rivets from the inside of the car out, but then if you're looking in from the engine bay, you're going to see that crappy side of the rivet on the engine side. So the inside of the car gets heat and sound mat and it gets carpeting to cover up the ugly side of the rivets. So I'll send the rivets in from the engine bay side into the interior of the car for like some of the transmission tunnel parts, and then definitely for all of the foot boxes going in. So all my rivets are going to be going in from the engine side into the foot box, which is the interior of the car, because it'll look nice and clean, and then in the long run, it just, to me, it just looks like a better build. I'll do the same thing on the back of the cockpit wall, where a lot of that aluminum has to be riveted to other aluminum panels, like the areas that make up the rear fender wells. And the manual doesn't specify, you know, that you should send them in from one way or the other. But if you look at some of the pictures, it shows it from the cockpit out. And so now if you've got the wheel off and you're looking inside, I don't care if you powder coated your panels or not, you're looking at the ugly side of the rivets. So we're going to send them in the other way. They're going to get covered up with heat and sound mat and carpeting. And so you guys kind of get that. So as I'm doing that stuff, I'll kind of show you the reason that I'm doing it that way. And I think it'll all make more sense then. But for now, I'm going to work on this footbox aluminum tonight. And I may or may not bring you back to show you the work completed tonight. If not, you'll see it tomorrow. Tomorrow for me, anyway. So the footbox panels are all fit for the driver's side and the passenger side. What I've done is I've left them loose in a couple of key areas. I've left them loose on the top here. So these panels, see, have some movement in them. The reason for that is that we have the firewall forward kit from one of the vendors, and even though there's a gasket that goes in here, I want to make sure that we're going to have space to get that gasket in there. So I'm waiting to fasten the top of it, or to even drill it. And then on the innermost portion right in here, we haven't done anything to fasten it because we've got the lower firewall piece and we've got the tunnel pieces that make up the seat floor. So I've left those loose on either side. We still have the footbox bottoms to put in the passenger side and the driver's side, and we'll be getting to those, but I'm waiting until the lift is available because they're a lot easier to drill when they're up on the lift. So I'm going to leave this video here because it's probably getting a little long right now. So I want to thank you guys all for watching. The work is going to continue on the 25th anniversary car. It's just that we're going to be working back and forth probably between Michael's Mark III and the 25th anniversary car right now. So the videos are going to go back and forth between that, and then whatever else may come to the shop in the meantime. So if you like the content, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, and all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys all next time. Have a great day.